Hello, I'm Svitek, and welcome to my Season 2 finale review, recap, thoughts for his Dark Materials. And just by that quick description, you can kind of tell that I'm going to spoil it, right? So if you have not seen the Season 2 finale, stop right now, go watch it, it's fantastic, and then return. Now, I should also mention the way I do my recaps and kind of talk about the show is I do it in two parts. One where I just stick to the TV show itself, and then in the second half I tie in the books and my knowledge of the books and kind of where things are headed, how things are different, and so forth. So if you've not read the books, then I'll make sure to also give another spoiler warning for that, so that way you aren't spoiled, right? Simple as that. So let's get into it without further ado. First off, I thought a really well done finale, both in terms of its various set pieces and the action that did take place, but also as far as the emotion. Granted, you could look at this like this is the precursor to this war that they keep alluding to, and the battles themselves are much more intimate. They're not, Helm's Deep from Lord of the Rings or anything of that nature. But nonetheless, you feel the emotional weight. And I think that's what really worked for this episode. Especially as a TV series, we've spent so much time with these characters at this point, including Will and so forth. And you're rooting for them, right? And so when Elise Scoresby passes, when even the witches who we don't have that much affiliation towards beyond like Serafina Pekalana, when they die, it is painful, right? And you feel for it. And the weight of it made it beautiful to watch, right? It made the stakes really, really intense. And so that's the success of this episode. And of course, it had a lot of amazing stuff to draw on from the books. But again, I won't quite get into that just yet. So let's kind of talk about I'm going to kind of go a little bit sequentially to a degree, because I feel like in this particular instance, it might make the most sense. But there's converging forces. There's the spectres, and that's what we kind of open up with, the witches really learning about the spectres, because from last episode, one of the witches is hurt. She's not to the level that we've seen spectres be able to get somebody, but she is hurt, right? And then the other force is, of course, the Magisterium, right? And so they're coming, and they're quite literally forces, right? They have this miniature army set out to, in this instance, get the shaman and get Lee Scoresby, but everything's converging. So there's that tension. There's that wonderful tension. Now, early on, what was fascinating to me, the other kind of converging force that we have is Mrs. Coulter. And I've talked about this before, but it becomes so prevalent in this episode especially, that who does she represent, right? Does she represent herself? And if so, what does that mean? Because it was so fascinating to watch her really explore the place that Lyra was inhabiting for basically all of season 2. And she looks at the jacket, she's kind of exploring, the kitchen, the bedroom, everything, right? And the way this is played out, you could see something going on. You see thought behind her doing this, but you can't quite make out what it is. There is a bit of empathy, but there's also a coldness. And it's like Mrs. Coulter is constantly, it's almost like her body is trying to create homeostasis for whatever her true nature is, because she's constantly having to adjust, is she too empathetic, too nice, versus, just being a cold-hearted person. And, it comes off in the way that only Mrs. Coulter does. And it's really wonderful to watch. So much so, I mean, we've always, up until this point, really seen, regardless of the nature of the person, we've seen demons, and they're humans. They're supposed to be one and the same, right? The demon is essentially like a person's soul, and for lack of a better term, like a best friend. You're not like, and to see Mrs. Coulter turn against the golden monkey, her demon, and just say, like, basically, suck it up. We're doing this. That was a fascinating aspect that we've not yet seen, and further showcases just how intriguing Mrs. Coulter really is, and how conniving and controlling. Like, the fact that her demon doesn't ultimately know her true nature, because the demon's done some deplorable things, right? Along with her, I mean, bowl banger and other things included. But even like this seems too far for the golden monkey, and that's fascinating to me. And yet she throws it in his face, like, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of her? And this, of course, draws attention to the fact that Pantalaimon really beat the snot out of the golden monkey back at Charles's house. And, I'm sure that is, top of mind for the monkey. Certainly, like, of course, as I mentioned, a demon is one and the same, right? If a demon dies, the person dies. And yet, I found it interesting that it was only the golden monkey who had to deal with the spectre, or specters, that came in to the former Lyra's house, right? And the golden, I mean, even though it's CGI, I thought it was really well done. You could see the emotion, just how scared the golden monkey really was. Like, I mean, he was trying his best to not let it affect him. But, I mean, he was inches away from basically death. Because he'd seen what this does, and the way he throws the witch's demon, and he's like, no, take this, basically. He doesn't say that, but that's the subtext. I thought just really well played out, and yeah, this whole scene was very tense and whatnot, and Mrs. Coulter gets the answer she's been seeking for this entire time, which is, what is the name of the child? The child being Lyra. It's Eve, right? The first woman, the mother of us all. And it's no secret, like, in this regard, that this is very much concerning religion, church, beliefs, science, and all that. And so, if we're kind of to believe, it's kind of subverting expectation, because it's like, Mary, I would think, right? Lyra is attuned with Mary. And so Mary, in some sense, is a good person, right? Certainly, like, from everything that we've seen thus far, we could say that we like Mary more than Mrs. Coulter. Sure, there are redeeming qualities. We can argue about Mrs. Coulter, but on the whole, Mary, it's like, there's no question about it. For my mind, and my money's worth, Mary is a good person, right? You would kind of qualify her as that. And yet she's supposed to play the serpent, right? And so biblically, the serpent is bad, right? It's original sin. And so it is interesting how this is all subverting, and this episode in particular really answers a lot of the season 2 questions. I won't say answers all the questions, because the true nature of dust and where this is all headed, and the war and what Lyra must do, those remain unanswered, right? And I think that's the beautiful way this is done is that, it answers the questions that are most pertinent to us in this moment, but leaves us enough cliffhangers and mystery to continue on. And you have faith that you will be rewarded for going on that journey. And so, yes, we get the idea that Lyra is Eve. Okay. We know that Mary is supposed to play the serpent. Okay. So by extension, right, it kind of leaves the question mark, okay, well, who's Adam, right? Who's Adam? And so, right now it teeters on the side where Will is Adam, right? Certainly, from Serafina's prophecy, that seems to, there is a boy. Now, as she says, I don't know if it's you, but she is taking a shot on that idea. And we'll talk about the knife and why that may kind of hamper things. And then there's, of course, God, right? And so, in this sense, God seems to be referred to as the authority. Now, the interesting part, as we learn, is that the knife is the only thing in existence that can kill the authority. And that's what Lord Asriel is doing. That's what the shaman was there all for, was to notify the knife bearer that this is his task. This is the return. We must return to free will. And these are big things. Again, we're answering some questions, but we're opening up like 20 different other questions of like, wait, okay, so free will, does that mean we don't have free will? And if we're waging war on the authority, isn't the authority / God supposed to be good and this and that, right? And you kind of get the sense like this is why it's called his dark materials, his perhaps relating to God and so forth. But it's very, to me, it's very interesting in that regard of what this all means, and especially, and I know I'm jumping all over the place to a degree, but in this way, it kind of makes the most sense to me. That scene between Will and his father when they finally meet. This is what for 2 seasons Will has been building up towards. It was to see his father. And it's such a heartbreaking scene on a number of levels. Firstly, I think for me, the aspect where, Will's father really tells him what his task is. Like, you are the knife bearer, and he's both proud, but also is scared because he knows what lies ahead and that his son has to do this. But at the same time, again, that furthers his pride because it's like, the knife, it's like a living entity, much like the ring in Lord of the Rings, if it kind of chooses you type of thing. And so if it chose him, there's a very specific reason. And so that brings much pride. And, poor Will, this guy, he's like, okay, he accepts the mission, albeit very hesitantly, but says, and then we go home to mom. And you can tell, at least, I don't know, maybe you can't tell, but for me, as I read it, the shaman just kind of knew he was lying. Maybe he didn't know that he was going to get murdered in moment's notice, but he knew the task that lay ahead was going to be very difficult. And we don't even know what that task is. We know, like, okay, bring the knife and to Lord Asriel because it's the only thing that can kill the authority. Objectively, we know, okay, cool, but what does that even mean? No clue, right? So, tall order. So in my mind, yeah, he kind of tells the lie. He feeds the lie that Will wants to hear in that moment. And he does it not maliciously, but from a good place of, and it's heartbreaking. They spend, 5 minutes with each other before Will's father is shot and killed. And in that moment, I think that this part of this season has been all about courage and having the courage to go on in spite of how young a person may be, in particular Will and Lyra. And so in this moment, Will kind of grows up, you know, and he's kind of, he's faced off, like the specters, we've seen them come towards him, right? And so it's not outside the realm that you know, he's on the cusp of something, right? Of change. And certainly change is a big theme of this episode. You know, Lyra and Pantalaimon, they have their conversation about that as well, of like, you know, soon I'll change, and what will I be? You know, in terms of the final demon form for Pan. And they're kind of questioning, what does that mean? And Pan says, you know, I'm scared of change. And Lyra says, I imagine most, you know, people are in general, or something or other like that. I'm paraphrasing from memory. And so that does bring about the notion of, like, you know, how safe will they remain? You know, right? They've always kind of had a childlike innocence, and it seems to have guided them well. But I think one of the things that kind of creeps in for adults is there's a lot of nuance, and you do start to see things. And so, you know, Lyra in this moment is very indecisive. You know, she opens up to Will about the story of Roger and how, you know, her decisions and her actions cost Roger his life. And she doesn't want the same happening for Will. And, you know, on the one hand, I think she understands that, you know, not doing anything will bring about their death. But she wants to, you know, she wants to honor Will, who just wants to go forward to meet his father. But at the same time, she also wants to be respectful, because Serafina thinks that's a bad idea for them to just essentially run off. And so she's really caught between a rock and a hard place. And yeah, that scares her. And I think this is, you know, that's what she's realizing that perhaps adults have to face. And, you know, certainly when she wakes up from her cat nap, to find Mrs. Coulter there, who's just killed another witch, thanks to the specters. Very menacing how she's able to control them. But, you know, Lyra's there, and now she has her. And we know that Mrs. Coulter's intentions, however noble they may be, are certainly going to be sinister. I mean, she puts her, like, basically in a box. So, yeah, lots going on there. And, you know, we suffer a lot of tragedy. Lee being, well, Lee and the shaman, you know. I think the shaman, because of, you know, not necessarily because we know exactly who he is and know too much about him, but we know what he represents. And poor Will, like I said, for 2 seasons, we've watched this poor kid try to get to his father. So that went, not for him, but also, like, this was the thing that was going to save his family, right? If he brought back his father, his mother would be okay. And now, he knows the mission he has to go on, but even when he returns, what his mother essentially feared that her father was dead, or, you know, Will's father was dead, you know, now that is a reality. It's no longer, you know, he's just gone from a world and happens to be another world. No, he is now dead, and that's it. And that weighs heavy, you know? I mean, losing a parent is heavy, not to mention what he's about to, like, theoretically face. So there's that. And then, of course, Lee's death, you know, poor guy. You know, he has done everything he could to, you know, to do the right thing. And I just love the interaction with him and his demon, right? Talk about a total opposite of how Mrs. Coulter treats her. You know, still to the end, they have their banter back and forth, and even though her demon is essentially confessing of like, hey, I'm so sorry, this and that, and it's like, why? And what I love about it is they go out on their terms. They're going to be laughing and poking fun at each other, and they're going to give it their all, right? And they did. And he has that last moment of like, I got to call Serafina. And sure, if you're being cynical, you could argue that that's what caused Lyra to be caught, because, he called Serafina, and then because Serafina wasn't with the kids, Lyra gets taken, which is exactly what Lee was trying to avoid, because he was always fighting for the protection of Lyra. But that's a cynical way to view it, right? He didn't know that. He didn't even know Serafina was in this world, necessarily. But sadly, it is too late. And, he passed. And it's such a powerful way to kind of see death. A lot of times, we're not even focused on the human. We just see the evaporation of their demons. And that's heavy, man. It's heavy. So, yeah, lots going on. Really, really intense episode. And then the ending. We get this voiceover from Lord Asriel. And it's really intense. And he's essentially addressing angels, right? That's who ultimately appears. And it sets up something very intense, right? But it sets us off very binary. Us or them. The authority or us. And so it begs the question, where does Mrs. Coulter lie in this? Because she's essentially trying to be a third party of some sort, right? Neither them nor they. And yet, certainly by Lord Asriel's mindset, and you can kind of, I feel like you can kind of glean others, they're going to hold it to be very binary, right? And so even if someone chooses to opt out, like let's say a Mrs. Coulter in some sense, they'll get grouped with the others. And that's scary, right? Because then by association, that puts Lyra there too, in theory. So we'll see. And then I wasn't expecting this, but we got, after the credits, we got Roger, right? We got this hazy view and we got Roger. And it's a nice little tease for season 3. What it means, we won't know. But that's the episode, and I thought a very fantastic episode overall. Please share your thoughts, your opinions down in the comments section, and let's talk about it, because I don't want this to be a monologue. I want it to be a dialogue, okay? Now this is where I get into the spoilers as far as the book, so comparing it and also bring forward the Amber Spyglass, which will be the text for season 3. So without further ado, I'm going to get into it. But if you've not read the books, don't want things spoiled in that way, then tune out. So overall, I thought this season overall did a really good job of sticking to the book. Now, of course, the pacing was altered a little bit. For example, how Charles interacted with Mary, that happened earlier in the TV series than it does in the book. So little things like that, but overall the spirit remained intact. The difference in terms of this episode in particular, not much, but when Will's father dies, it's not at the hands of a witch. In the book, it's at the hands of a witch who was jealous. And then angels come and protect Will, and it kind of goes forward from there. And we don't get the tease, the tease at the end. That's actually from the Amber Spyglass, right? In this regard, I actually thought what the show did was far better because, you know, just to have a jealous witch, especially after, I mean, at this point, Will's kind of been skeptical of the witches to begin with. And so to bring in that layer of it, I think would have been too much, especially in the finale. But even in general, like, had we had more time to spend with it, right now, I don't like it, right? It makes sense in the book, I'm not knocking it, but in the show, I thought it was executed well of like, you know what, it's just a random Magisterium person that shoots, you know, because it's the imminent danger versus like a jealous witch. Far better in my opinion. As far as like what they were able to pull off, you know, and the direction that they chose to go with. I love the tease at the end because it does set up the Land of the Dead. You know, I am so looking forward to the Land of the Dead and all this. And we know, you know, as far as the authority, right, one of the aspects that I appreciate about the book is that it doesn't necessarily make it God, right, as this other being. It's just kind of, you know, the original angel and so like just the mythology is a little bit different. And I love the idea that, like, yeah, there are angels in the world and they're good, but there are also bad angels and who have been kind of corrupted and, you know, don't believe in humanity's creativity, freedom of thought, and so forth. And, you know, I'm excited to see more of Lord Asriel, hopefully. You know, seeing kind of the kingdom of the authority, I think will be very interesting. You know, there's a lot to look forward to, and certainly the place that Mary goes to, you know, with those creatures, that'll be fantastic to see. I think that'll be a lot of fun. And I think it will be a wonderful set piece because, you know, much like with Cittàgazze, they really did a number on it because and I think, you know, they really played it up and spent a lot of scenes there because it's like, you know, if we built this set piece, we put a lot of money into it, let's utilize it. And so I think as far as the world that Mary goes to, I think they'll utilize it really wonderfully because they'll have to. I mean, it's gonna be very expensive to utilize it. So I think I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how they utilize Lee and Will's father, of course, Roger in the Land of the Dead. You know, all the characters that we love, you know, have the chance to really interact with our characters in the Land of the Dead. And there's so much that's about to happen. You know, one of the aspects that I didn't talk about in this episode particularly, just because it wasn't necessarily a throwaway, but it was minor compared to everything else, but still beautiful, was the fact that Mary, she does escort the Cittàgazze kids to essentially their parents, to their hideaway. And I thought that was a nice touch. You know, it's not in the book necessarily. And so it humanizes Mary further. And it's just a nice, like, ending moment for the kids, you know? I mean, in the book, you understand, like, they just kind of get caught in the crosshairs of it all, and it's sad. But for them to kind of have a nice conclusion, you know, I think it's just a nice little added touch. And, you know, they invite Mary, but of course she says, no, I have to keep going. And so in that regard, it is what it is. But yeah, I thought nonetheless, it was a fantastic addition to this. So really, really wonderful finale. I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed season 2 a lot. Just like I thought season 2 stuck to the source material more so than first season. And that's not a knock, that's just an observation. And I'm looking forward to what season 3 really brings. And it is confirmed for season 3. So that's exciting. And yeah, we're finally gonna get to see the war that we've been building up to. So looking forward to it. Anyway, thank you for joining me for this episode and any of the other episodes you might have joined in on. I truly appreciate it. It's been fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you. I just love this show, and so I want to share this passion, and this is a chance to do that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and looking forward to season 3. Bye.